Dear viewers, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, good evening. My name is Danilo Lubkiewski, and I welcome you on behalf of the Kyiv Security Forum. I address you from Kyiv. Even now, I hear shellings around our city. It's already a month, the month of Ukraine's pain, blood, and suffering. The month of unbelievable bravery of the Ukrainian heroes, the Ukrainian men and women who defend our motherland. The month of Ukraine's global support. The month of Russia's brutal and unprovoked war against us and against humanity. How to stop Putin, a cynical dictator and a war criminal. How to help Ukraine defend its independence and sovereignty. How to guarantee Ukraine's long-term security. How to bring the perpetrators of this war to account and justice. And how to stop Russian imperialism. This is the fight for Ukraine, but it is also the fight for civilized world order. Today, we will discuss how to win this fight, and I'm proud to introduce our distinguished guests. First of all, I'm happy to see with us Madam Secretary Victoria Nuland, United States Undersecretary of State for Political Affairs. Madam Secretary, thank you very much for joining us. Minister Norbert Rettgen, member of the German Parliament, chairman of the Bundestag, former chairman of the Bundestag Foreign Affairs Committee. I thank you, sir, for being with us today. Ivanna Klympush-Tsintsadze, Chairwoman of the Verkhovna Rada Committee on Ukraine's integration to the European Union. I thank you, Ivanna, for being with us. And Arseniy Yatsenyuk, former Prime Minister of Ukraine and the Chairman of the Kyiv Security Forum. And I start from Arseniy. Mr. Prime Minister, please share with us your views, your assessment of the current situation and the perspectives. How do you see it? You're welcome.
This is the biggest human tragedy after the Second World War. This is the tragedy that unfolded in Europe. This is a disaster that was orchestrated and manufactured by Nazi-style ruler who is President Putin. Ukrainian people are suffering. Ukrainian people are fighting. As for now, this is a month-long war. War for our freedom, war for our country, war for our liberty. We are fighting like hell. And this is not just Ukrainian war. Putin decided to wage the war against the free world, against democratic countries, against Ukraine, against NATO, against G7, against the European Union, against everyone who respects human liberties and rights. Ukraine is on the front line. First of all, I really commend the efforts of the free world, and I do really appreciate personally President Biden and his administration, and Madam Secretary, in your person, the entire United States government. Mr. Minister, in your person, and the entire European Union, that's what Putin didn't expect. He didn't expect that there will be no daylight between NATO member states, that you will be on the same page, and that you are ready to support Ukraine, that you are ready to introduce sanctions, and that you're ready to deliver lethal weapon to support Ukrainian military to defend our homeland. My appeal to the free world is as follows. What is needed right now for Ukraine? In order to prevail, in order to win this righteous war for our freedom and liberties, mainly, I would ask for the delivery of lethal weapon, anti-tank, anti-missile, anti-ship military equipment. We need additional ammunition and armament for Ukrainian fighters, for Ukrainian men and women in the uniform, who are so brave, who are so strong, that they deserve the highest respect, the highest global respect. Second, what is needed, we ask you to impose secondary sanctions on the Russian Federation, not to allow Russians to evade the sanctions that have been already imposed. The third issue is that we need to cut off Russia from the main financial source that actually subsidize Russian military. It's all about the energy. Energy embargo has to be imposed. We do understand all troubles and difficulties related to the gas embargo for certain European countries, but the US, Canada, and the United Kingdom already imposed oil embargo on the Russian energy sector. We ask our European partners to do the same. This is the high time to make these kind of decisions as quick as possible. Fourth, Ukraine needs financial support. Half of Ukrainians are jobless as of now. So they are killing Ukrainians. They are actually killing Ukrainian economy, and Putin tries to eradicate Ukraine as a state and to eliminate Ukrainians as a nation. So this kind of military support, sanctions, and financial support is of crucial importance. Fourth, for the entire world, it's important to see very strong, united NATO. NATO already resurrected, and the Western world is much stronger than any dictatorship regimes in this world. And we are proving this, and we have to prove this. The fifth one is that more than 4 million Ukrainians already fled Ukraine. Could you imagine? 4 million. And we have around 10 millions of IDPs, of internally displaced persons. So we kindly request you to help those in the need, those who left Ukraine. And the time will come when these people will go back to Ukraine, to free, united European Ukraine, because we're gonna win this war. Putin will never win. Our fight is the fight for freedom and liberty. This is our joint task. And I am convinced that we will prevail.
I thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. Madam Secretary, thank you again for your time and for your support. Today, President Biden visited Brussels for many important meetings. He had a packed agenda in Brussels, starting from the emergency NATO summit in the morning, then followed by the meeting of the G7, and then by meeting his European counterparts. The aim is to agree on new measures to help Ukraine and address further Russia's threats. How do you assess the situation, and what practical results do you see from today's meetings of President Biden and his colleagues? You're welcome.
Thanks, Danilo, and thanks to Arseniy, and it's good to see Norbert and Ivanna. I am honored tonight to be in the presence of Ukraine's leaders, Ukraine's people. You are amazing the world with your bravery, with your strength, with your resolve, with your patriotism. As Arseniy said, you are fighting for all of us. You are fighting for the free world. This is about the future of democracy. This is about whether autocracies can change the rules of the road by force, can impose their will on any or all of us. You know, when we first uncovered Putin's military plan for this war, which was back in the fall, his military told him that he would be in Kyiv in 5 days. His military told him that he would have full control of all of Ukraine in 2 weeks. And it is because of each of you, every woman and man and child who has sacrificed, that nothing like that has come to pass. And in fact, the Russian military now is ground nearly to a halt. But I don't have to tell you the cost. We see it. We see it in Kharkiv. We see it in Mariupol. We see it in the Kyiv suburbs. We see it in the huge flows of IDPs and refugees. And we understand that every single human sacrifice is made on behalf of the values that we hold dear. So Danilo, you asked why President Biden wanted to go to Europe and asked leaders to gather for the NATO meeting, for the EU meeting, for the G7 meeting. We can do a lot by video to support Ukraine, and we have, but it is not the same as leaders of the free world gathering together in our great institutions to ensure that we are standing with you and that we stay solid and that we tell Putin no. So at NATO, it was about the massive effort that we are all making individually as nations and collectively to ensure we get you the weapons that you need for this fight. The United States, I think you know, has now provided some $2 billion in weaponry just in the last 6 months. And these are exactly the systems that you have been needing and asking for and that are making the difference in this fight and that are turning Putin's tanks and aircraft and now ships into scrap metal. We are also looking at new systems that we can get in. I'm not going to talk about them because it doesn't help your operational security or the mission to talk about them. But we have listened to you in terms of what you need. We have analyzed the way this fight is going. And it is not only the United States effort, as you said, Germany, a country we never thought would move into the lethal weapons business, has understood that neutrality is not an option in this context. And countries around the world, and the US is working to ensure that as other countries are able to support you, that materiel gets in and gets to the fighters who need it. I also won't say much more about how that is being done because it will affect operational security. The other thing that President Biden is doing with his counterparts, particularly in the G7 and the EU, is working on the sanctions. You know, we promised Putin that if he prosecuted this war, that he would face the toughest sanctions that Russia could imagine. I think we didn't even imagine ourselves how impactful a complete financial blockade of the Russian banking system would be, together with our European and now our Asian allies and partners, and Israel and other countries around the world who have joined these sanctions. So there's the immediate impact of the financial sanctions on the banking system, where he can't even open his stock market lest the entire system collapse. Credit cards aren't working in Moscow. The store shelves are empty. Know this. Know that these sanctions are working on Russia. But there are also the export control sanctions, which will affect his ability to reload and repair his war machine going forward. And not only that, Russia's ability to be a high-tech, modern nation. So he is sacrificing his people's future for this vain imperial project that you will stop. And the next project is, of course, humanitarian support. President Biden announced today an additional $1 billion in humanitarian support from the United States. All of the countries gathered in Brussels today are providing mass amounts of humanitarian assistance. We are able to get it into Ukraine thanks to your brave citizens. We are also able to support countries like Poland, Moldova, Romania, who are processing Ukrainian refugees. We also made a declaration today, the president did, that the United States will accept up to 100,000 Ukrainians who need refuge. Germany's already accepted more than 200,000. I won't take Norbert's words. Our hope is this is temporary. That is our expectation. I know that's what you want, that all of these people will be able to go home and rebuild. The last point is simply, we have to make the moral case. My president, even in advance of our government doing the analysis we would normally make, just said when asked last week, do you believe Putin is a war criminal? Yes, he is a war criminal. We don't have to tell you that. You know what is happening on the ground. But we need to ensure that the whole world continues to express its moral outrage, and that he and those responsible for this vicious, inhumane war are held accountable for it. And we will. And some of us will dedicate our lives to that. But let me just end by telling you the following. You are not wrong that you are winning. You are winning this war. You are beating the supposedly great Russian military. And why is that happening? It's happening because you have three things. You have the support of the whole democratic world, but you also have two things that Putin has denied his own people. You have truth and you have freedom. And those things are essential for prevailing in this fight. So we stand with you. Slava Ukraini, Geroyam Slava.
Geroyam Slava. Madam Secretary, I do thank you very much for these words, these very important words for Ukraine. And this is the message of support for Kyiv and for every Ukrainian city and for every Ukrainian citizens, and we highly appreciate this. In his numerous addresses to the world's parliaments, President Zelensky constantly he calls upon the leaders of the free world to provide Ukraine with the defensive weapons. And this question stands above all. This is the way how to protect ourselves. This is the message which Kyiv today sends to the world. Help us defend ourselves. But there is also yet another important thing, and if I may, I would like to ask you about this. It's difficult to say right now, but nevertheless, how do you see the diplomatic and political settlement and the perspective of the political solution, including the security guarantees for Ukraine? And this is point number 2, which is raised by President Zelensky. He, calling upon the international leaders, he constantly says that Ukraine needs strong security guarantees. It's a difficult question, but nevertheless, Madam Secretary, what's your opinion? How do you see some general shape of the light in the end of tunnel, political solution, how to move ahead?
Well, thanks to Nilo. Let me first say that I commend the Ukrainian government and its diplomats and leaders for going to the diplomatic table almost immediately after this conflict started, and for staying at the table, no matter how difficult it is. And I also think that it's important to keep the hope and the promise of a diplomatic solution alive. But we agree with President Zelensky that diplomacy and negotiation does not mean capitulation. And we've seen this movie too many times from Moscow before, that a war ends and they do not leave, that a war ends and they hold on to what they have, they wait a couple years and they come back for more. And that is not sustainable for you, and it is not sustainable for the free world. So what's most important here is that even as you stay at the table, you demand that this proceed properly. Who ever heard of a peace agreement before there was a ceasefire? There needs to be a ceasefire first. And then there needs to be a clear plan for how Russian forces are going to get out, how the international community is going to support you in ensuring that, how we're going to rebuild Ukraine, and how you're going to restore the kind of security that you need so this never, ever happens again. These are all tough issues. But right now, we see Moscow doing the kabuki of diplomacy, but not committing to fundamentally stop this war and talk and figure this out. We will be there with you. We will figure out how we ensure that this never happens again, but we've got to start by stopping this war. I'm going to leave it at that. I'm not going to get into negotiating the details of this. That's for Ukrainians to do. One last point, if I may. I also think it's been very important that neither my government nor other governments gathered in Brussels today have tried to negotiate this for you or have gotten between you and Russia. You are the ones on the front lines. You are the ones whose sovereignty and territorial integrity has been violated. You are the ones whose cities and towns and villages are being turned into rubble. So only you can decide what a fair peace is, and none of us should push you to a place that is not safe for you, because you are also the ones deciding what is most safe for the free world here. And as you make those choices, we will stand with you, but we must not impose anything on you.
I thank you, Madam Secretary. I thank you. You said that Ukraine is winning this war. We have to win this war together. This is the matter for the whole civilized free world. This is the matter of future perspective and free world order that we need to protect it together. And I thank you very much for your time, for your input, and for your great remarks. We do appreciate. And now I would like to invite Ivanna Klympush-Tsintsadze to respond to our questions. And here, Madam Chairwoman, may I ask you, what immediate priorities will you highlight today? And how do you assess the situation? You're welcome.
Thank you, dear Danilo, honorable co-panelists. I'm very touched and thrilled and grateful that you have invited me to also address our audience and talk directly. And I think with honesty, with all honesty, to our friends, both from the US and from Germany and from the free world. That's what we are doing every single day. Not being tired, and we will not get tired trying to get our message across. And Ukraine is unfortunately on fire. And our only guilt for being on fire is because we wanted to live in free, democratic, value-based country and wanted to choose our own path. And that's why barbaric terrorist state has decided to wage the war against us and is right now ruining our homes, ruining our towns, ruining our lives, and taking away lives of our civilians, of our children, of our brothers, sisters, elderly. And obviously, we see how over this month of the war that Ukrainians have been fighting and pushing Russians back. We see how the whole paradigm of the Western civilized world's assessment of the situation in Ukraine has been changing. We see the tectonic changes in the policy of so many countries. And yes, Toria has rightly pointed out that something that has totally impossible on the 24th of February, for example, with Germany or Sweden or some other countries giving Ukraine weapons or providing Ukraine with weapons, is already a history today because they've started doing this. We've seen the change and shift in policies of even such neutral countries as Switzerland, and that has violated basically its neutrality since first time since 1813. We appreciate all these changes. We appreciate the support and also the leadership from the US of getting this support united and coordinated in terms of both helping Ukraine militarily and at the same time pressing on the Russian Federation. And we also see how the strategy of the West is changing over this period of time, because I think it's not only Putin who thought that Ukraine will be taken over in the couple of days. I am sorry to say this, but I think many in the West, and that is clear from some of the diplomatic conversations that right now are kind of surfacing already from the first days of the war, when some of the Western high-level diplomats have been saying that, yes, probably in like 48 to 92 hours, we probably will live in the new reality when Russia will have the control over Ukraine. So we have proven everybody wrong. We have proven this with courage, with resolve, with unity around major goal to protect our country. And obviously, we wouldn't have been able to do this without the backing of the free world. But unfortunately, I think that the free world is still several steps behind from the brutal, barbaric policies of the West, of the Russian Federation against Ukraine, and of the pain, blood, destruction that he is bringing on our territory. And I'm not going to say something that I think it's pretty banal, that the Third World War has started not now in Ukraine. He has started it back in with his Munich address back in 2008, and then continued it with the attack on Georgia, then continued it with the first attack on Ukraine back in 2014, and now is continuing it with this full-scale invasion against our country, which has as a first goal erasing Ukraine from the map of the world, erasing Ukraine and Ukrainian nation from the map of the world. We've been through that before. But his next step is definitely not targeting exclusively Ukraine. He has been clear about that in his ultimatum to the West back in December 2021. He said it clearly. He wants to go back to borders of NATO of 1997. So that's why it is about values, it's about democracy, it's about the order and international order and security order as we know it, that we all together have to defend. So I totally subscribe to those priorities that Arseniy has laid out with regard to sanctions. And I think that it's clear right now that loopholes in the sanctions that we see right now, that SWIFT is being, that not all the banking system is being cut off SWIFT, so they can't use these possibilities, these loopholes for the benefit of their banks, that not all the countries have subscribed to, readily subscribed to oil and gas embargo on Russian Federation, that not everybody is willing to impose sanctions, personal sanctions on all the political VIPs and businessmen and their families. All of this allows for additional gains for Russian Federation. And unfortunately, even this unprecedented package of sanctions that we see right now with regard to Russia takes time to hit on Russian Federation. And we do not know, Ukrainians, whether we have this 3, 5, 4, 6 months or a year or two, because every single minute, every single hour, every single day, we're losing our lives. So therefore, we need more weapons, we need those weapons that would allow us to protect ourselves, with starting from long-range missiles, long-range air defense, and ending with the protective gear for our soldiers, for our defenders. We need real comprehensive sanctions. We need a humanitarian aid. We need Marshall Plan for Ukraine for the future. But we also need the prospect for the future, that we can choose our path. And that's why we are discussing right now the European Union membership perspective in terms of candidate status for Ukraine. And that's why I think everybody has to well understand, we are not going to give up on our dream, our strategic goal to also join the North Atlantic Alliance, because neutrality for us today is something that will unfortunately mean colossal demotivation for all the passionate part of the Ukrainian society that has been driving the change since 2014. Because accepting a demand of Russian Federation on Ukraine's neutrality would mean the defeat of the West that has yielded to Putin's nuclear nuclear blackmail, because neutrality for us today would mean tomorrow some demilitarization of Ukraine, federalization, and the day after tomorrow that would mean that we are turned into some Russian southern federal district, and would mean slavery for Ukrainian people. We do not have the luxury of being neutral. As the world, the free world, has to take the sides today, being either on the side of light or on the side of evil. And obviously, we see how everybody is turning and turning closer to the side of light. The same way Ukrainians don't have a choice whether we can stay neutral or we would want and attempt and plan and reach the goal of joining the union that will give us protection and security in the future. We are proving every single day that we are capable of defending values that are talked about with our blood, with our dedication, with our resolve. And that's why I believe that we are ready to join once the war is over. Thank you.
I thank you, Madam Chairwoman, and especially I'm grateful for your important remarks about Ukraine's so-called neutrality, which never protected Ukraine against the Russian aggression. So this is an extremely important message which is sent today from Kyiv to the world. The idea of neutral status, which is blackmailed by Russia, is simply unacceptable and not realistic. And it will never give us a long-term strategic solution. And now I turn to Mr. Minister, to you, and if I may, I would like to make a specific question here. What we feel that Putin has lost. I mean, he has lost to Ukraine, but he remains very dangerous. And it means that international pressure should remain, should continue, and should become stronger. Mr. Minister, you are famous for your strong position regarding the full Russian energy embargo. How do you assess the situation? And in your opinion, what should Germany do to stop Putin?
Okay. Thank you so much for inviting me, for having me. And I really want to say how moved I am to participate in this Kyiv Security Forum. I'm sitting here in Berlin in a warm room in a peaceful city. And at least the two of you, Arseniy and Danilo, I don't know, Ivanna, where you're located actually now, also in Kyiv. Yeah, so the three of you, you are in Kyiv, and you are doing this Kyiv Security Forum while the shelling is going on, the lethal threats, the horror of the war. This is your environment, and I'm really moved that nevertheless you decided to continue with this security forum to practice our democratic values and stick to our values and continue our democratic life. And I think this is a very powerful demonstration for what this fight against the aggressor Putin is about. I want to express my admiration for the Ukrainian people, because I'm convinced, and the entire world is rightly convinced, that Ukrainians are ready to give their individual lives, both men and women, for the survival of the nation and the state and the nation state. And this is a heroism which is seen all over the world. You are setting and giving a historic example for the will to survive. And exactly because of that, of course, because of skills, because of equipment, but it is the will to survive, you will prevail. And everybody is so happy and shares the pride of you in your president, who has become the embodiment of the will to prevail and to survive. I want to reiterate and underline that this war against the defense against the aggressor and the war criminal Putin. It's happening in Ukraine, but this is a war against Europe, which is fought against Ukraine, but you are fighting for a free and peaceful and united Europe. This is not only a political phrase, not at all. It is the core of the truth, what we have to understand. You have understood this perfectly, but we Germans, Europeans, we have really to understand that if Putin were to win this illegal, brutal horror and war, Europe and the history of Europe would take a different course. We would for a long time not see a united Europe, not a free Europe, but Europe again would be divided and it would not be free and not be at peace. And he would extend, of course, the course of war. If this world were forced that war is successfully reintroduced as an instrument of policy, as it was in the 19th century, and now is done under the circumstances of the 21st century with the weaponry we have. If the world were forced to learn this lesson, and this course would have success, it would be extended, of course, into Georgia, Moldova, Belarus. It would be extended into the Middle East and the Near East and Northern Africa and beyond. So this is not only a European cause, it's even a global cause for global and world peace. So the world has to understand this. And I think we can say that because of your example and your successes on the ground militarily, but also because of your truthfulness and your communication about what your intentions are, and the clarity of your character and the decency, you have really convinced the world about what this war is about. The horror of the war makes things quite easy and absolutely clear. There is a goal, and the goal is that Putin must not win. Because if he were to win, it would have the consequences I described. So it's our common goal that Putin must not win. We are convinced he will not win. And I agree, politically, he has already lost. He has totally lost. And militarily, he is absolutely not successful. But politically, he has already lost. He has, for example, unified the West as never before. And I want to briefly mention this, that the unity of the West, the Europeans, with the United States, with Canada, and extending more and more, is united as never before. I can particularly say this from a German perspective. I have been, as you know, from the start, from 2015 on, always fighting against Nord Stream 2. Now this project, over the course of days, has been abandoned. And there is a consensus in our country now that this was a false project, and we are happy to have left it behind us. It's history now. The delivery of weapons, it was a doctrine in Germany not to deliver weapons to countries which are involved in military conflict. We have abandoned a doctrine which existed for decades. And we were always reluctant to use the instruments and institutions of the financial international world and trade system like SWIFT as a tool of sanctioning countries. We have abandoned this doctrine and have made use of this. So there is in a very short period of time, over days and weeks, we see significant change due to the rightfulness of your cause. But as you mentioned, I think it's part of that things have become easy and clear, that it's not enough. We have done a lot, but we have not done what we can do. My principle for our policy is, for you and in our own interest, we have to do everything possible short of waging war by ourselves. But everything possible means we have to impose all the effective sanctions possible, available, and which would be effectful. So my consequence is that we have to cut off the major economic lifeline of Russia, and this is energy exports. We are paying 600, 700 million euros per day to Russia as energy bill. And by this we are supporting and financing the system and the war, and this has to be stopped. Sanctions are about endurance, to limit and to reduce the endurance of bad behavior. It's not about deterrence, but it is about limiting and stopping the ability to endure something. And so you have, and I think we should not wait for any more escalation. You are living in the horror of war. It would be cynical to say we have to wait for more, for chemical weapons or something like that, before we apply all what is possible. So I'm really making the case every day. In a time of 1 hour or so, I will participate in another TV talk show, and it will make the calls for stopping the import of energy from Russia. Instead, we should impose an energy embargo, because it's the utmost goal of policy and politics per se. Stop war. Stop an aggressive, unjust, illegal war. And there is no time to wait for. We have to act now.
I thank you. Mr. Minister. There is one brief question that I have to raise as well, because I believe this is important. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz said that this war is Putin's war. Indeed, that's Putin's endeavor, Putin's war. But in our opinion, in the opinion of many Ukrainians, we should understand that there is a collective Putin. The Russian society should bear the responsibility for the crimes committed already by this corrupted regime. Don't you find that we have to talk about this? Don't you find that we have to remember that that collective Putin is a huge problem for the global security and should be treated properly, and the diseases of, and there would be a need for deputinization of Russia. Don't you find that it should be further perspective how to bring the perpetrators of this war to account and to justice? You're welcome.
Yeah, so I think we have to differentiate in terms of time and in terms of people. I think what we have to focus on now is the person who started and decided this war, and this is the Russian President Vladimir Putin. So I think the first and absolute priority is that Vladimir Putin does not win and does not prevail. So this is absolutely important. And I think this will be achieved by the resistance and the strength and the will of the Ukrainian people. And quite probably then it has to be done within Russia. Might be the case that it has to be, because of the lack of endurance in Russia, be it within the military, be it within the people who are not ready to suffer more and more young people, 18, 19 years old recruits who didn't know what they are going for, and they are coming back dead. So I think we have to focus on that. Of course, I think and the world can see it, war crimes are being done these days. And all people and these people who are committing war crimes have to be taken into account. But then after this has been accomplished, I think then we really have to look for the political situation within the country, what it has done with the country, what is happening then there, and then we should really assess the situation in the there is now a time where we have to seek security in Europe against Russia. But there must be also a time, and we have to work for it, that at some time a free and peaceful Russia has to be a part of Europe, its political order, and the unity of Europe. So I think there is a timeline, and we have to differentiate between the groups who bear different responsibilities and what has to be done now and first. And I think we have to concentrate now.
Mr. Minister, I thank you, and I appreciate your strong position and your support for the Ukrainian men and women in uniform with arms defend Ukraine today against Russian aggressor. I wish to thank all our participants, all panelists for their remarks. In my opinion, the most important message that is sent today from our discussion is that Ukraine is not alone, and we will win together. I thank you for your time, and thank you very much for your great remarks. Дякую.
Слава Україні!
Слава Україні, героям слава!